Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to Edinburgh Jewish Cultural Centre Live. I'm delighted that we've got Jess Robinson with us tonight because normally I only see Jess in the summer at the Edinburgh Fringe. Go to see her wonderful show, and she also usually joins us at our festival open day. So Jess Robinson, for anyone that doesn't know, is an actress, a singer, an impressionist, a comedian, voiceover artist. She was on Britain's Got Talent on 2017, but as you discover, her singing and acting career started way before that. She's also the lead female voice on Dead Ringers, and was on Spitting Image as well. But she also has a stage career. She's been in Fiddler on the Roof and played the lead in Little Voice. What else can I say, Jess? You're an award-winning podcaster as well.
Yeah.
So welcome, Jess. But tonight we're not talking so much about Jess's performing career as her writing career, because Jess has recently published a wonderful new book, which I was lucky enough to get an advance copy of. Life is Rosie, Grandma, Me, and Our Diaries, at 23. So welcome, Jess.
So much. I think you should be my agent after that lovely introduction.
I'll do you a good price. So, Jess, your book explores the diaries of two young 23-year-olds. Your late Grandma Rosie, would you pronounce it Rosie?
Yeah, Rosie, yeah.
Yeah, Rosie. So your late Grandma Rosie living in Germany in 1938, and your own diaries from October 2006 in Ealing in London. Can you tell us how and why you got started on this project?
My grandma Rosie and I were filming backstage when I was on Britain's Got Talent, and my agent Sophie met her then, and Grandma then was about, I think she was 100 years old, and she had had such an incredible life and an incredible story. And she spoke to Sophie about it, and Sophie just said, "We've got to find a way to tell her story." And so I put it in one of my live shows, and I sort of pitched it as a documentary, and over the years, and as a sitcom. And in this industry, you do a number of pitches for radio and TV, and you often like put so much work into it and then send it off, and then nothing happens. You don't even hear anything back. You don't even get a no thank you. And then my agent said, "Do you fancy writing a book proposal?" And I went, "Yeah, okay." So I wrote book proposal, sent it off, imagining I would never hear anything back. And a month later, HarperCollins got in touch and said, "We'd like to publish it." And that was in 2023, end of 2023. And it was just, and that's it. And I started writing, and it was such an exciting and rewarding process. And it was so fabulous to delve into Grandma's history. Yeah.
So you knew a certain amount about her early years, her childhood, but you didn't know the whole story, or?
Yes. So I knew that, I always knew that she was chucked out of Germany. I knew that, and I knew that she had worked in an orphanage, but I didn't know that it was actually a little bit that preceded the Holocaust in 1938, which was called the Pollen Action, which was when Hitler got all of the Polish Jews out of Germany as a sort of dress rehearsal for what was to come. And many people don't really talk about it, and we're not taught about it in school, in history lessons. So it was a piece of history that I really didn't know about. And Grandma's diaries document the whole thing, from when the Gestapo come and knock on the door, to her being deported to this internment camp in a border town in Poland called Zbąszyń. And this is all because, even though my grandma was born in Germany and only spoke German, no Polish, and she thought of herself as a, she was still, even when she was in her hundreds, she still was a very proud German woman who never lost her accent. The Germans didn't see it that way. And it was because her parents were Polish and she happened to have a Polish birth certificate. So that's why she was pushed out of Germany. But actually, it ultimately, that way of it happening to her ultimately saved her life, I think. Because in this internment camp, she continued doing what she was always doing, which was looking after children. She just took it upon herself to look after the refugee children there, and made herself so invaluable that she was asked to accompany them over on the last Kindertransport boat. And she was 23 and she had about 70 children in her care. And then she was supposed to turn back and go back to Poland. And war broke out and she couldn't. And I mean, what a bittersweet thing to happen in many ways, just horrific, but her care of children saved her.
Yeah. So you knew that much of the story, but obviously Diaries delve deeper, don't they, and reveal more. But there was a problem, wasn't there, with the Diaries because they were in German.
Yeah, they were not only written in German, but they were written in a very difficult to decipher, old-fashioned handwriting, which was a mixture of, I can't remember what, and Suttelinschrift. And it was only taught in German schools in a very small time period. But luckily, my mum had a wonderful friend, and they sat down and translated all of her diaries at the kitchen table and hand wrote them and just sent them to me in the post. It was very analog.
And well, we'll come to why this might have been a difficult process for your mum in a little while, because there are a lot of diaries and a lot to translate and decipher. But there's more to that as well. Hannah, I mean, did you know a lot about your grandmother's early life and family history? I mean, did she talk a lot about her growing up?
She spoke about her 9 brothers and sisters, and I knew that her family were very important to her, and she loved her mother, and she spoke very fondly. And I remember all the black and white pictures that she'd show me when I was younger, and I probably wasn't even that interested then because I was just a little plonker. But it all became a lot more sort of real to me when I decided to apply for a German passport, and we had to retrace grandma's heritage. There was a law that meant that because she wasn't seen as a German citizen, that we weren't eligible for German citizenship through ancestry. And then a new law came in, which was that if anyone had been living there and was persecuted, you could apply for citizenship. But we had to find her birth certificate, her parents' birth certificate. And that's when I came across all of the old diaries. And that sort of revealed her to me in a whole new way, because I only knew her as my cuddly grandma who gave me sweeties and was just came to every single show that I did and that mum argued with. That's all I sort of knew about her. But to re-meet her as a 23-year-old was so fascinating, to see the very hopeful and vibrant and positive young woman that she was compared to the person that I knew. Was like 2 different people.
Interesting. Let's hold on to that phrase that you used. Your mum argued with her, and we'll come back to that in a minute as well, because that's quite intriguing as well. But let me ask you this. Let's just turn to your diaries for a minute, and you. So at an early age, you went to stage school. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
And was that something that for some reason you just wanted to do? You got into singing and drama, or was it something that was related to your grandma's story at that time? What do you think?
I think music has certainly been a thread that's run through my family. My grandma studied at the Royal College. My grandpa was a jazz pianist. Then my mum went to the Royal Academy, and my sister and my two sisters actually went to the Purcell School, which is a music school. So everybody in the family was musical. The only reason I ended up really going to that performing arts school, though, was because I was really rubbish at sport. And my mum had got a job at this performing arts school in Tring called the Arts Educational School, where she played the piano for ballet lessons, she taught the piano, and she ran the second-hand uniform shop. So I auditioned and I got in on a little partial scholarship there, and that's where I went. And then I found out that dancing is worse than sport, actually, and I was worse at it. I was really like a baby giraffe, just terrible.
Right. But singing you were good at, and what about playing instruments? Did you learn any instruments?
The recorder. Yeah. I played the recorder and the drums and the piano for a bit, but singing was my main thing.
Just going back to your grandma, so 1938 was when everything changed. What else did you discover about, well, actually, another thing you had in common with your grandma is that you have done some teaching with children as well, which you said you enjoyed.
I loved it. I loved it. It honestly, so I sort of chose to include my own diaries in the book because I wondered when I read Grandma's excerpts whether I would have had the same dignity and stoicism as her at that age if I had been going through something similar. And also because I'm not a historian, I felt like I needed to write it from a very sort of human family sort of an angle rather than just sort of reporting the facts, because that felt very intimidating to me. But I'm really good at oversharing, as you'll probably discover if you read the book. So that's why I included the diary, and it was interesting to find the things that we did have in common and the things that made us very, very different. But the teaching, I had been doing loads of different day jobs, just trying to earn enough for my rent or my mortgage or whatever was going on at the time. And the one thing that I finally found, which made me look outside myself and stop being so up my own bum, really, was teaching, especially teaching children with special needs. I loved it so much. It gave me so much. And I honestly, I do think it should be policy for all young people to either care for the elderly for a year or work with children. I think it's really an important part of human development to give something back and to experience that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that takes us again back to 1938. Your grandmother is working in an orphanage. She's 23 and she's enjoying it. It seems to be a great job. She's putting on shows, teaching kids music and singing. And then the walls just crumble in. And she gets expelled from Germany with her family to Poland. Tell us a little bit about where she found herself, what her living conditions were when she was first in Poland.
So she was expelled from and arrested by the Gestapo in 1938, October 1938, with 3 little boys from the orphanage and put in a police cell that night. And then she was taken to Stuttgart, and then she was made to board the train. And the 3 little boys went back to the orphanage. They were allowed to go back, which at the time Grandma was very relieved about. But then sadly they got caught up in Kristallnacht. But the first night, I think she slept basically on the platform of this border town train station. The second night, she managed to find her the barn doors were unlocked in this little border town, and there were thousands of Jews who poured out, who had been sleeping in there that night, and she found her father and her grandma. And that night, I think she slept that night in the barn with them. And in the night, she described people dying, and it sounded utterly horrific. And then the next day, her dad got the few coins that she had and her grandma had, and went and found some lodging with a postman and his wife. They took the bedroom. The postman and his wife slept on the kitchen floor, and in this was sort of two beds together with a wooden frame in the middle, and grandma slept on the wooden frame in the middle between her snoring grandma and her father. And then set to work the next day, went and started cleaning up the children, and they all followed her. She said that she described herself as the Pied Piper of Hamelin, and she just started telling them stories and taking them into a field to play, and that, yeah, it was just incredible.
And were these details things that you only found out from the diaries?
Yes. Yes, so there was some bits. My grandma was interviewed by a guy called Alan Reich, whose dad had been in the internment camp as a little boy, and my grandma had looked after him. And he traced her amazingly because he wanted to find out what his father's experience had been, because his dad never, ever, ever, ever talked about it, didn't want to talk about it at all. And I think because it was just so very painful being torn away from his parents. And so he interviewed Grandma for a documentary, which I don't think has even been made yet, but he spent hours and hours in there. So there was quite a lot of footage of Grandma talking about that. And I guess when you remember things, you're remembering a memory, but to have it there, right there in the writing.
So this must have been a pretty emotional journey for you. You knew one side of your grandma, you knew how, I don't know, cheerful she could be and sharing music and everything, but there's something else there that you're discovering.
So yeah, do you mean about my mom?
Well, first of all, the resilience of your
Oh,
grandmother to, in the face of adversity, to look out for the children.
yes, that was the thing that kept her going. The thing that kept her going all the way through was to have a purpose. And I think that is something now, I think I understand, that has been passed down through the generations, that we have this way of keeping going, or well, we call it Jewing on in our family, because I was once doing, stick with me, I was once doing a production of Hamlet the musical, another Edinburgh thing. And the rehearsals had been going very badly. I was playing Ophelia, and I think I got a bump on the head with a water nymph in my drowning scene. And I was sitting backstage with an ice pack on my head, and the water nymph was beside me with an ice pack on her head. And I was having a little cry, and she said, oh, don't worry. Do you know, when I get like this, my mum always says, Jew on. And I went, oh my God, are you Jewish too? She meant, are you Jew on your period? I thought she meant, Jew on. Our ancestors got through the Holocaust. We can get through this. So that's now become a ridiculous family saying. So if the washing machine breaks, if you get a parking ticket, if dad dies, for example, everybody just, come on, we just got a Jew on. So that is something I think that has been passed down, a keep calm and carry on sort of attitude. But yeah, Grandma found she had to have a purpose, and that's what kept her going, looking outside of herself and looking after others.
Mm. And so, yeah, let's talk about your family now. Your mother, her sister, your stepsister. So this project began to involve everyone in a way, didn't it?
It did, because I decided not only would I get a passport for myself, but I would get one for the whole family. Everyone would get a passport, because once you do the application, you can just everybody can get in on it. And so we sort of went through some of this discovery together, and Mum really, really, really got quite exhausted and upset and quite angry, really, about keeping translating Grandma's diaries, because it turned out that I always knew they had a difficult relationship, but I think it really brought a lot home to my mum, because my auntie, my mum's younger sister, had a really lovely, loving relationship with my grandma. She really needed my grandma, and I think my grandma needed to be needed, whereas my mum was very independent and quite headstrong, and I think actually quite similar to my grandma in many ways. And she did not have a very nice relationship with Grandma, and Grandma was not very nice to her a lot of the time, even though she was very nice to my Auntie Steffi. So that was quite a difficult thing for her to read about Grandma, I guess, being so compassionate to these other children, and the fact that, Grandma was a bit of a hero. And so it was a hard thing for Mum to square, that she had a difficult relationship with her, and it was something that never really got resolved or put to bed, and Mum's hung on to a lot of that hurt, really. I mean, it comes out as anger and resentment, but it's hurt, it's pain. So and Mum, she's so strong and brilliant, and she really, really was very open. My whole family have been very open about their relationships, their relationship with Grandma, and it sort of became a book then about mothers and daughters, as well as what we inherit. And yeah, it's painful, but it's also real, and I think that's really important.
Hmm. And I mean, your mother and your auntie, in some ways, are similar, but in other ways, very different. I mean, your mother, again, like your grandmother, and perhaps a bit like you, seems to be quite an all-rounder. She does all sorts of things where you've already described her as working in the school, teaching music, but also running the second-hand uniform
Yeah,
shop and
yeah,
all sorts of things. But a very, very busy bee. Is
really busy.
you know,
Yes.
I mean, reading the book, I got a bit exhausted at times when I heard her kind of schedule for the day from playing the organ in the church.
Yeah.
Um, and there's a wonderful bit in the book, everybody. If you think this is a very heavy book, it is heavy in places, but there's a wonderful bit. Because, to just explain, if you don't mind me doing this, that you had a little WhatsApp group, um,
Yes.
which is your mum, your
Yeah.
auntie, your stepsister Katie,
Yeah.
and sorry.
My niece as well, who was 23 at the time.
Oh
Yeah.
yes, your niece, yes. And you're constantly having these WhatsApp conversations,
Yeah.
sometimes in very odd places, like your mum was playing the organ for a funeral and a christening or something.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. That's what
and
happens. If you move to a little English village and you're the only person in the village that plays the piano, that's how Mum just got roped into playing the organ in the village church.
yes, and quite late on in the book, there is this wonderful scene where you're having quite a serious conversation on WhatsApp, and your mother keeps saying, "Sorry, I've got to concentrate on the baby's what's happening to the baby or whatever." It's very funny, very comical, as well as the other side being very serious, and so that's interesting. So let's talk a little bit about these relationships. So that's your mum. Your
Mm.
mum's in this village. She does all these different jobs. Your auntie um, lives on a boat. Is that
She lives
right?
on a house.
A
Yeah. Yeah.
houseboat, and
She she
she's
looks sort
quite
of
different,
an older Kate Bush.
right?
She does spells and has a horse, and she once rescued a turkey from a farmer's market and had him living on the boat and called him Kissy Face. So that's the other end of the spectrum.
Yeah, yeah. And just personality wise, they're different. And as you say, they had a very different experience of their mother. Um, why do you think that was? I mean,
I think as a child, Stephanie was quite sick, and she had epilepsy, and um, so she really needed Grandma, and she was very affectionate and very sweet. And I think when she came along, perhaps Grandma's attention went on to Steffi a little bit more. Um, but I think it really was the thing. And Mum got some peace from realizing this recently. But it was the thing of Grandma feeling needed. She says in the book, all I can do, all I must think of is working with these needy children. I think she liked children to be affectionate and feel like they needed her. And I don't think Mum perhaps expressed that as a child. I,
hmm.
I think it was something to do with that.
But with your mother, there was also a sense that she expected an awful lot from your mother.
My mum had to be the mensch. She really was expected to well, we were all expected to visit every Sunday, but to have the education, to have the husband, to have the career, and then the nice house. And then when she got all of those things, Grandma was a little bit jealous, I think. And I think it was really difficult because Grandma's life Mum was a teacher as well, and Grandma's life had been on this trajectory and it was snatched away from her. And then I think perhaps Mum achieved a lot of the things that Grandma wished she had. And so I think there was a lot of trauma that Grandma was carrying. And of course, people in those days didn't have a lot of therapy, or, it was just to push it down and keep going, I guess.
Mhm.
So there are a lot we know a lot of traumatized people from that period.
Hmm. Yes, I wondered about that. That intergenerational, the stress that gets carried down, and I wondered if somewhere in there is the need to make your children secure, to push them to be secure in one way or another. I don't just mean financially, but in lots of ways. They've got to have a career of some sort. Did you feel that from the more you got into the diaries and seeing the differences between your mother and your auntie, how they were treated?
Yes, my auntie was never really expected to have a career, or if she was, and the fact that she didn't really, she ended up just caring for Grandma as Grandma got older, and um, living on the houseboat and being on benefits and things like that. And if Mum had done that, Grandma would have been so vile to her. But the fact that Steffi did it, it was Grandma's little baby, and she could. It was quite an unfair difference. And parents aren't supposed to have favorites, but it was very. I didn't really realize it until I really spoke to Mum and spoke to Steffi and got their recollections of their childhoods. And it was a hard thing to stomach, because you don't really want to think of a Holocaust survivor as anything other than a hero. And Grandma was a hero, but I think it's really important to know that she was also human and 3D, and we all are. And everybody has light and dark in them, and nobody's perfect. And it sort of made me understand her and relate to her more in some ways. But it is painful. But that's
Mm.
also why I had to include my diaries and my narration, because if I hadn't, it would have just been quite a dark book. But it's ended up being a very funny book as well. And there had to be lots of light and levity and laughs in there.
Yeah, I kept on thinking it's a kind of three-in-one book. I thought to begin with, I thought, oh, it's just going to be these two diaries and a few comments about them. But it becomes so much more than that, because it's also about your life, your biography or autobiography in a sense. and the struggles that you've had, you know, in your career. And everybody has struggles in their career, no matter what profession they're in. But it becomes that it's about your grandma's life, but your mother's life, your auntie, and of course your stepsister and her daughter to an extent. But Jess, maybe this is a good time to hear an extract from the book.
Yes.
And I don't know what you're going to read, so
Well,
surprises.
so let me find a bit. Okay, so here's a little bit from when, now which bit shall I read? Okay, I'll read this first little bit. This is from Diary of Rosie Shaw, Friday, the 28th of October, 1938. And this is, should I read the whole thing? It's quite long. It starts like this. I am writing this in a dark cell with bars on the windows. Unbelievable. I have to pinch myself that I am here. There is so much to explain. The Thursday evening reading group embodied the most wonderful time of living and working at the orphanage in Esslingen. I have had so many totally new and beautiful experiences here. Theodore Rothschild, his wife, Aunt Adele, Samuel, Jonas, and I were sitting together and chatting. On this particular evening, we were focusing on our possible destinies. I was pondering emigrating to America. We moved on to talk about the present political situation, and then suddenly, like a bad dream, it became all too real. I jumped as the doorbell rang, 10:30 at night. Then a shout, "Is Herr Rothschild there? Police!" I was chilled to the core. My heart missed a beat. So then she describes them having to leave. And she goes on to say, saying goodbye to these dear fellows was the hardest thing for me. Then for the last time down the back stairs, those stairs which I had rushed up and down so many times, to leave forever. I just know it is forever. Then outside into the wonderful courtyard for the last time, down the long flight of steps and out into the cold moonlit autumn evening and along the footpath. All Jewish Poles are to be deported from Germany and must go to Poland immediately. When I think back to yesterday, it was another world. In my reality, it feels like a distant beam of light, which is getting more distant and more hopeless, fading, fading, fading. And then, Diary of Jess Robinson, Friday, 27th of October, 2006. I have nothing to wear. None of my clothes fit. Just ate half a jar of Nutella. Too depressed to write. Bye. You'll see a little bit of contrast.
No difference there. Yes. So yeah. So you found all this out about your grandmother. How did it? How does it leave you about your grandmother? What's your sort of feeling now about her? I've got a nice little quote from the book that I will read out in a minute. But tell me how you think of her now.
I think it's really taught me that nobody is just good or bad, dark or light, Jewish or not Jewish. You know, it's everybody is a muddle of all things, and it's wrong to. I don't think I judged her from the things that I found out about her relationship with my mum, and I think if anything, just knowing her more, the whole all-round version of her, warts and all, has just made me love and appreciate her more and everything that she went through. I have so much respect for her. It's been a really precious journey.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you said that, because there's a little bit, well, lots of things in the book that struck me, and I'll just read one little thing that you wrote. You said that Rosie was complicated, she was light and dark, kind and sharp. She had a steeliness that could cut and a warmth that could hold you like no one else. She was, in other words, human.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the reasons why we will never get to the point where we don't need more stories about the people that were in the Holocaust,
Yeah.
because my feeling is, it's not so many million, it's individuals, and understanding that they're real people,
Yes.
seeing all sides of them, I think is what I'm trying to say.
Because,
There's another thing as well that I think it's a general comment from you. I acknowledge both the love and the pain, the tenderness and the harshness. I think you're talking about life in general, or as Mum puts it, the kiss and the slap. I want to say a little bit more about the kiss and the slap. Because it's a phrase that just caught me. You use it
yes,
a few times.
it sort of came about as a way that Mum described her relationship with Grandma, that she could be so warm and so gorgeous and then just say something so cutting and so undermining that's what it felt like, a kiss and a slap. Yeah, I think there's also a huge amount in the book about identity and my identity, and well, obviously Grandma, who saw herself as German, was told all her life that she wasn't, about Mum's identity as a daughter and what it meant to be a daughter, but also about my Jewishness, because I had a very confusing, because my mum played the organ in the village church and my dad was not Jewish. I grew up singing Ave Maria in the village church, and I don't speak Hebrew, and I wasn't bat mitzvahed, and so there was, although I knew I was Jewish and I held that it as almost like a badge of honor, or being in a club, I was sometimes seen as too Jewish for roles. I was told I looked too Jewish to be Cinderella when I was in my early 20s. And then I tried to join a dating agency in Temple Fortune, and I was told I wasn't Jewish enough for that because my dad wasn't Jewish and I didn't have a bat mitzvah. So I have grappled with that sense of things as well, and it also feels like a very vulnerable moment to be writing a book about being Jewish.
Absolutely, yeah.
It feels scary, and it's all so complicated and nuanced, and I'm not one of those people that gets involved in chatting about politics and things like that, because I'm never too sure exactly what my opinion is, and I don't want to say anything wrong or people to think that I'm ignorant, or so I just sort of keep my mouth shut. But it's scary at the moment to have a huge compassion for the people around the world that are suffering, and also for my relatives that are in a secure room all the time in Israel, like I'm sure many people. So it's such a shockingly it feels like such a shockingly close time to be talking about my heritage.
Which brings me back to kind of identity and your grandma. So you mentioned earlier that you were applying for German citizenship, and maybe I won't say what the outcome of that was, because if anyone reading the book, it's a nice thing to keep hanging on and see what happens. But for your grandmother, she was German, her parents were Polish, and yet she wasn't identified as German. Is that right? At one point?
She was given reparations by the German government, so she
Yeah.
received. So it was acknowledged enough that she received a little money from them, but when she died at the age of 103, she was still not seen by the country that she adored. Her time there, she looked back with rose-tinted glasses, and part of the reason that it's called Life is Rosie is because she just described everything that happened to her as it was just a big adventure. Ah, life is rosy, what do I have to worry about? But she always looked back on those days in Esslingen, working in this orphanage, as the happiest time of her life. And so the country that she loved was you know, she was basically cancelled by the country that she loved and not acknowledged by them for her whole life, and died still not being thought of as German by the country. It feels so cruel.
Hmm. And so, why did you want to get German citizenship? And did your mum, your auntie, and your stepsister and her daughter feel the same, that they wanted?
I wanted to get it because I just really wanted to skip the airport queues. I was, we were in the pandemic. My dad had just died, and I was doing on and keeping busy. And it was something that Sophie, my agent, suggested. Why don't you, you know, see if you can get a German passport so you can work in Europe as well? Because, you know, at that point, no one knew what was happening. My industry had shut down completely. And so we were just all grasping at straws to think, how can we work? What can we do? Anyway, so it was just a project that I embarked on, and I said, I'll get them for you as well, Mum. I'll get them for you as well, you know. And my mum and my auntie were like, why? And we can if you want. Why? Stephanie said, I don't go anywhere. I just live on my boat. But my sister Katie and Sasha, my niece, were quite excited about it. My God, what a lot of paperwork.
And talking about Katie, I mean, this also brought out issues between you and Katie as well. Is that right? Can you say a little bit about that? I mean,
Um, my my older sister Katie, um, she is a very different person to me. We really are like chalk and cheese. And earlier on, when I was in my early 20s, and she's 15 years older than me, we've got different dads. Um, she and I were quite a good team. But as I started embarking on a similar career as her and having a little more success than she did, I guess, and just being probably more like my mum, just more outspoken, more bold, sort of probably a bit clumsy and careless and brash. Uh, Things have her just started to get a bit strained, and she is very. She's she's a little bit like, what is Katie like? She's very fair and very. She can be very reserved and very sort of straight and uh, she said actually when I recorded the audiobook, she said, I bet you're going to do me like Mary Poppins, aren't you? And I said no, and then I listened back and it is a bit like that. So we're just very, very different. And actually speaking about our mum and our relationship with mum and the things that are similar and different between us has actually made a crack a little bit wider. We're getting back, but in writing this book, there was a lot of acknowledgement between all of us that our relationships aren't perfect. I don't think any families are. And again, I think that's why it was really important to include it in the book, because I've had so many people getting in touch with me and saying, oh my gosh, I can't believe how open you all are. My family don't talk like that. My family don't have these conversations. Or I feel like that about my sister. And then we got this, I don't know, we sorted something out. Or it's been quite inspiring and heartening to hear other people's stories and how much it sort of inspired them and amused them and touched them. Yeah, but I think it is an extreme. I mean, I'm an oversharer. It's a very open book.
Well, it is, but I think it's an important book because I think you've done it in a warm and caring way, really. And the first question I really asked you online about this was, and perhaps stupidly, I said, you know, you've written about your mum and your auntie and other relatives and other people, your closest family. How did they feel about this? Were they happy for you to keep this in the book? and you came back and you said,
I said, well, first of all, they had to all read an early draft of the book and approve um, it and say, they had to, text me back or put in writing, I'm happy to be portrayed in this way, or, I give you permission to write about me in this way, just so they couldn't sue me. But and that was fine. And then they read some, later drafts because I was being very open and sharing it with them. And also my auntie was sending me pictures and saying, how about you include this? And everyone's been so open. And they were all very, very proud and very, probably quite amazed that I got a book deal, having not gone to university or anything like that. But on the day after the book launch, which was on the 29th of January, Mum was suddenly worried about what her friends would think of her suddenly, and my auntie Stephanie was suddenly feeling a bit sensitive and worried about how I portrayed, how much I shared about Grandma, about the realness of her. And Katie was worried about what Grandma would have thought of me being so open. And so I think the idea of it was all very exciting, and the actual reality of it just shook everybody a bit. And my mum thinks that Grandma would be just very proud. And my auntie did say, I said, what do you think she'd think about me sharing her diaries? And Grandma said, oh, she'd say, I'm in the ground now, what do I care? But I do think it's so important to see the people, as you said, the people that lived through this time period as real humans and not just a statistic. And I think that's something else that I really began to understood when I looked at what happened to her sisters and brothers and the other people that were in the internment camp with her. Just really thinking of them as actual living, breathing humans, not just a black and white photograph.
But I think for any family, the trauma of the past or the experiences of the past affects the future generations. And I think there's, I came up with a phrase that I thought it's a fearless book. There's a lot of raw emotions. It's fearless and unflinching, and there's lots of raw emotions. And in a way, I think not just you, but the other members of your family that have participated in this and given permission for the story to be told, and their story, have done something really worthwhile. And I'm sure that anyone that reads the book will get a lot out of it. I mean, obviously, there's all the showbiz stuff, Jess, which is fun and fascinating, some funny auditions and some horrendous experiences as well that you've had. We don't need to go into now, but so there's that. And I must admit, there were some moments of real laugh out loud moments, So it's a great book. So thanks very much for taking part in this interview. For the moment,
thank you.
I'm just going to thank Jess, and I know you're on holiday at the moment, so thank you for taking your time to join us. So thanks, Jess.
A pleasure. Oh, and if anybody would like to come and see my show at the Edinburgh Festival, I'm back this year with Elton Reimagined. So tickets are available now.